November 24th, 1971, Portland, Oregon. A man in his mid-40s, dressed like any traveling businessman, approached the counter at Northwest Orient Airlines. He wore a dark suit, a neatly pressed white shirt, and a black clip-on tie. Nothing about him stood out. He didn't fidget, didn't mumble, didn't hesitate. He handed over $20 in cash and bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. The name on the ticket, Dan Cooper. The flight he booked, Northwest Orient Flight 305, was a short trip, just 30 minutes in the air. It was the day before Thanksgiving and airports were busy. No one gave the man a second glance. At 2:50 p.m., Cooper boarded the Boeing 727-100. He chose seat 18E, located toward the rear of the plane. He carried a briefcase and a brown paper bag. Once seated, he ordered a bourbon and soda and lit a cigarette. Like any other passenger, he seemed calm, relaxed even. At around 3 p.m., shortly after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. At first, she didn't read it, used to business travelers slipping their phone numbers on paper. She tucked it in her pocket. He leaned toward her and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Florence opened the note. It was neatly printed, clear and calm. He wasn't bluffing. Cooper then opened his briefcase just wide enough for her to see. Inside were 8 red cylinders, what appeared to be dynamite, and a tangle of wires attached to a battery. She kept her composure and alerted the pilots. The captain, William Scott, quickly informed Seattle-Tacoma Airport and Air Traffic Control. The FBI was called in. What followed was methodical. Cooper gave his demands $200,000 in negotiable American currency, which meant unmarked $20 bills, 4 parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve, and a fuel truck ready on the ground in Seattle to refuel the aircraft. He wanted all this ready by the time they landed. If it wasn't, he said, he would blow up the plane. While the plane circled the Seattle skies, authorities scrambled to meet his terms. Passengers were unaware of the crisis unfolding. Cooper had instructed the crew to act natural. He didn't raise his voice. He was polite. He tipped well. He even paid for his second drink. To the passengers, it was just another delay. At 5:24 p.m., Seattle authorities delivered everything Cooper requested. The ransom money came from local banks, carefully photographed and with serial numbers recorded. The parachutes were sourced from a nearby skydiving school and a local airbase. Once the plane landed, Cooper allowed all 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants to deplane. No one was harmed. He retained only 4 people: the pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, and a single flight attendant, Tina Mucklow. As the sun set and rain began to fall, Cooper gave new instructions. He wanted to fly south toward Mexico City. The flight path needed to be low and slow. The cabin was to remain unpressurized. The landing gear would stay down, and most importantly, the rear air stair, a set of steps that could lower mid-flight, had to remain operational. What Cooper planned to do was bold. Some would call it insane. Others would call it perfect. But the night wasn't over. At 7:40 p.m., Northwest Orient Flight 305 lifted off again, this time headed south under very specific conditions. The destination on paper was Mexico City, but everyone on board knew that wasn't the real endpoint. Not for Cooper. The flight crew followed Cooper's orders precisely. The aircraft stayed below 10,000 feet. Speed was reduced to 200 knots, barely above stall speed. The cabin remained unpressurized, and most importantly, the rear air stair remained unlocked, capable of being deployed mid-flight. Only 5 people were now on board: the 3 men in the cockpit, flight attendant Tina Mucklow, and Cooper himself, seated in the back. The weather had turned. A cold front had rolled in from the Pacific. It was now dark. Heavy rain was falling. Winds were harsh. The aircraft was flying low over southwestern Washington, just north of Portland. The terrain below was rugged, dense forests, rivers, and jagged hills. At 8:13 p.m., the crew felt something. The cabin pressure gauge dropped, and the aircraft pitched upward slightly. A warning light blinked on. The aft air stair had been activated. No one in the cockpit saw Cooper again. They continued to Reno as instructed, where the FBI awaited on the ground. The rear stairs were still down when the aircraft landed, but Cooper and the money were gone. He had jumped into the storm, into the black sky at night over uncharted wilderness, wearing a business suit and loafers with $200,000 strapped to his body. There was no chase, no parachute seen descending, no emergency beacon, no signal, nothing. The FBI's manhunt began immediately. The operation was codenamed NORJAK, short for Northwest Hijacking. They believed Cooper jumped somewhere near the Lewis River, south of Mount St. Helens. Dozens of search teams were dispatched across miles of forests, ravines, and rivers. They found no parachute, no trace of clothing, no body, not even the briefcase or fake bomb. Local farmers were interviewed, loggers, truckers, railroad workers, anyone who might have seen something unusual. Air National Guard helicopters scoured the terrain, but there was no sign of a landing zone, injured man, or lost gear. The FBI's early theory was simple. Cooper didn't survive. Jumping in that storm with outdated parachutes and street shoes was a death sentence. If he didn't die on impact, he likely froze to death. They believed his body was still out there, somewhere tangled in a tree or swept down a river. But years passed. The forests were searched again. New rivers were explored. Not a single human remained surfaced. No one fitting his description was reported missing. No body was discovered. No curious hiker found a weathered skeleton or scattered parachute rig. And the ransom money? Not a dollar of it appeared in circulation. The bill's serial numbers had been recorded, and the FBI had alerted every bank and federal agency in the country. No matches were reported. For a man presumed dead, Cooper left no proof of death. That was the part that gnawed at investigators. If he'd died out there, why hadn't they found him? And if he hadn't, then where was he? When the FBI stepped into the empty cabin of Flight 305 in Reno, they found almost nothing. No fingerprints on the seat, no personal items, no spilled drink. But Cooper had left behind one thing: a black clip-on tie. It was an ordinary tie, cheap, sold at J.C. Penney, still clipped to the collar of seat 18E. Cooper had removed it some time before he jumped. Whether it was intentional or accidental is unknown, but that small item would become the single most important piece of physical evidence in the entire case. At the time, the FBI dusted the tie for fingerprints, but got nothing usable. The technology just wasn't advanced enough. The tie was sealed in evidence storage for decades. Then, in the early 2000s, advances in forensic science gave the case new life. In 2001, investigators recovered a partial DNA profile from the fabric around the collar. But partial DNA isn't enough. There's no way to confirm it was Cooper's. The tie could have been secondhand. It might have had multiple handlers. Still, it was something. But the real breakthrough came later, not from the FBI, but from a group of amateur researchers. In 2007, a private team known as Citizen Sleuths gained access to the tie. Using electron microscopes, they began analyzing it for trace materials invisible to the naked eye. What they found was shocking. Over 100,000 microscopic particles were embedded in the fabric. These weren't everyday contaminants. Among them were pure titanium, unalloyed, extremely rare, bismuth crystal cerium, and other rare earth elements, titanium antimony alloy, not commercially available at the time. In the 1970s, these materials were found in only a few industries, specifically aerospace manufacturing and specialized chemical labs. This wasn't dust from a factory floor. It was high-purity material that would have required industrial precision to handle. The team believed that Cooper may have worked in an environment like Boeing or in high-grade metallurgy or research and development. The tie became a fingerprint, not of DNA, but of professional identity. This discovery reshaped the suspect list. Anyone without a background in aerospace or military contracting became less plausible. The idea of Cooper being a random drifter or bank robber started to fade. It also changed how investigators viewed his planning. Cooper didn't just pull off a daring escape. He likely understood the plane, the equipment, and the materials he was handling. He knew the Boeing 727 had a rear air stair that could be deployed mid-flight. He knew that certain models lacked sensors to prevent it from opening in the air, and he requested very specific parachutes, 2 mains and 2 reserves. In fact, investigators believe that Cooper asked for 4 parachutes deliberately. He may have wanted authorities to think he might take a hostage, forcing them to provide real parachutes instead of sabotaged ones. The FBI quietly admitted this was not the work of an impulsive man. It was planned, calculated, cold. The black tie, so easily overlooked at first, had become a symbol of the mystery, a silent witness. It gave investigators both scientific and psychological insight. Cooper wasn't just a man in a suit. He was someone who had been near classified tech, military-grade materials, and aircraft systems. And for years, that tie sat quietly in a cardboard box, holding secrets no one had thought to ask. 9 years after the hijacking, the mystery took a strange and unexpected turn. It was February 10th, 1980. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was on vacation with his family near Tina Bar, a sandy stretch of the Columbia River just north of Portland. He was digging a fire pit when his hands struck something strange: bundles of old, decaying cash. The family notified authorities. The FBI arrived quickly and began analyzing the money. What they found made headlines across the country. It was Cooper's ransom money. Ingram had uncovered 3 rubber-banded stacks of $20 bills. The bills were heavily deteriorated, but the serial numbers were still readable. All 3 stacks, totaling $5,800, were a match to the serial numbers the FBI had recorded in 1971. This was the only physical portion of the stolen $200,000 ever recovered. The bundles were discovered buried under a few inches of sand near the waterline. They hadn't just been sitting on the surface. They'd been there for a long time. The rubber bands were still partially intact, meaning they hadn't been there for decades unprotected. This discovery raised more questions than answers. How did the money get there? Tina Bar was roughly 20 miles west of the suspected jump zone. Based on wind, flight path, and terrain, the area didn't match any of the FBI's primary search regions. Some investigators believed the cash had washed downriver from a more distant location, carried by storms or flooding. But forensic tests showed inconsistencies. Sand and algae deposits suggested the bills hadn't traveled far. Others theorized the money had been intentionally buried there, perhaps by Cooper himself or by someone else who found part of the loot. But if Cooper had survived, why bury only $5,800? And why never return for it? The biggest puzzle was the condition of the bills. They showed signs of prolonged exposure, but not consistent with being in open water for 9 years. They seemed more like they had been buried shallow, possibly at a later time. This created a timeline problem. Had Cooper survived, hidden part of the money, then disappeared again? Had an accomplice dumped it to mislead investigators? One possibility, often overlooked, was that the Tina Bar discovery was a decoy. If Cooper feared being caught with the full $200,000, dropping a few bundles might throw off the scent. But that theory didn't fit either. The area had been searched in the years after the hijacking. Why hadn't the cash been found sooner? To this day, no one knows how the money got there, or why only that specific amount surfaced. The remaining $194,200 in ransom has never been recovered. Not a single bill with Cooper's serial numbers has shown up in circulation, pawn shops, casinos, or black markets. And while the Tina Bar bundles were later auctioned for historical value, their presence changed the case in a subtle but powerful way. It proved that Cooper made it to the ground. Whether alive or dead, he had touched land with the money, at least part of it. That fact alone was enough to reignite the question. If Cooper lived, where did he go? Over the 5 decades since the hijacking, the FBI investigated more than 800 individuals in connection to the D.B. Cooper case. Most were quickly ruled out. Wrong height, no skydiving experience, airtight alibis. But a few names stood out. Some were serious possibilities, others were colorful, strange, or self-incriminating. The mystery of D.B. Cooper became as much about the suspects as the crime itself. Richard McCoy Jr., the copycat who got caught. On April 7, 1972, just 5 months after the Cooper hijacking, a man named Richard McCoy hijacked a United Airlines Boeing 727. He demanded $500,000, received it, and parachuted out over Utah. The details were almost identical to the Cooper case. Same aircraft model, Boeing 727, same method of escape, rear stairway, same parachute request, same calm behavior. But unlike Cooper, McCoy was caught just days later. Authorities found handwriting samples and fingerprints linking him to the ransom note. McCoy was a Vietnam veteran, Green Beret, demolition expert, and skilled skydiver. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison. In 1974, he escaped using a fake handgun made of dental paste. The FBI later shot and killed him during a confrontation. The FBI officially ruled McCoy out as D.B. Cooper. They cited differences in appearance and an alibi. He was supposedly home in Utah on Thanksgiving, the night of the skyjacking. But not everyone bought that explanation. In 2024, McCoy's children came forward with new evidence. They revealed a modified parachute rig found on their family property in North Carolina, believed to match the type used in the Cooper jump. They turned it over to the FBI, along with a logbook and harness. DNA analysis is currently underway. This is the most significant development in the case in decades. If the FBI gets a DNA match to the tie, the mystery could be over. Robert Rackstraw, the code breaker's confession. Another popular suspect was Robert Rackstraw, a decorated Vietnam veteran with a checkered past. He was a helicopter pilot, explosives expert, and had served in Army intelligence. After the hijacking, several typed letters were sent to newspapers claiming to be from D.B. Cooper. A group of private investigators, led by journalist Tom Colbert, believed they contained hidden messages, codes that only someone with military intelligence training could embed. One code allegedly read, "I'm LT Robert W. Rackstraw." Rackstraw never denied or confirmed his involvement. He often teased reporters, offering vague answers. He died in 2019. The FBI never charged him. Critics say the evidence was circumstantial. Supporters say Rackstraw had the skills, the motive, and the ego to pull it off. Sheridan Peterson, the Boeing insider. Sheridan Peterson was a former technical writer for Boeing. He was also a known skydiver and smoke jumper, someone who parachuted into forest fires. He looked strikingly similar to the FBI sketch. He had access to titanium dust and other rare metals found on Cooper's tie. And he understood Boeing aircraft intimately. Peterson claimed he was in Nepal during the hijacking, though documentation was sparse. The FBI never cleared him. They collected a DNA sample, but the results were never made public. He passed away in 2021, taking any secrets with him. Others worth mentioning the FBI also investigated. Kenneth Christiansen, a former Northwest flight attendant whose brother believed he was Cooper. Dwayne Weber, who reportedly confessed to being Cooper on his deathbed. L.D. Cooper, accused by his niece, who recalled a strange Thanksgiving gathering in 1971. All were eventually ruled out. But each brought new twists, new theories, and more fuel to a case already overflowing with speculation. What remains today is not just a list of suspects, but a cultural gallery of maybes. People want Cooper to be someone clever, someone brave. Others want the mystery to stay unsolved. But as DNA technology improves and archives are reopened, the truth may finally break through. For decades, the D.B. Cooper case was cold. The FBI officially closed the investigation in 2016, citing no actionable leads. Public interest continued, but federal attention faded. Documentaries were made, theories were debated, but the trail itself, ice cold. Then, in late 2024, something changed. It began not with a government agent, but with a YouTube investigator named Dan Grider, a retired pilot with a passion for aviation history. Grider had long believed that Richard McCoy Jr. was D.B. Cooper. But until recently, it was just theory, speculative and lacking hard evidence. That changed when he was contacted by Shantae and Richard McCoy III, children of the late hijacker. After the passing of their mother, the McCoy family decided it was time to speak up. For years, they had suspected their father might have been Cooper, but they kept silent, partly to protect their mother, partly because they lacked proof. But in 2024, while cleaning an old family property in North Carolina, they discovered something unexpected. Hidden in storage were a heavily modified parachute rig, a skydiving logbook, a weathered parachute harness, old gear believed to match descriptions from the 1971 hijacking. They brought the materials to Dan Grider, who documented the find on video and reached out to federal authorities. And despite the FBI having closed the Cooper case years earlier, they responded. In September 2024, Grider and McCoy's children met with FBI agents and turned over the items. According to their statements, the FBI took the materials to Quantico, home of the FBI laboratory, for forensic testing. The most important goal, a DNA comparison. Could any biological material on the parachute match the partial DNA profile recovered from Cooper's tie? That profile, extracted in 2001, has long been considered the only viable genetic clue in the case. This development is more than just newsworthy, it's unprecedented. The FBI has not only acknowledged receipt of the materials, but has also considered exhuming McCoy's body for direct DNA testing. If a match is confirmed, it would mean that Cooper not only survived the jump, but also hijacked again, escaped from prison, and lived a double life until being killed in 1974. It would also mean that for over 50 years, the answer was hiding in plain sight. The parachute itself tells its own story. According to Grider, the modifications on the rig are highly unusual, suggesting it was adapted for a jump from a commercial airliner. Certain features matched the kind of military parachute Cooper was suspected of using, including elements believed to be consistent with the NB-8 model. But the most powerful element isn't in the rigging, it's in the DNA. If even a partial match is found between this equipment and the DNA from the black tie, the FBI would have probable confirmation that McCoy was Cooper all along. And that changes everything. Because unlike speculation, this is physical, verifiable, biological evidence. It bridges two cases, Cooper and McCoy, into a single line. It would close one of the most famous unsolved cases in American history. As of now, testing is ongoing. The FBI has not made a public statement, but sources close to the investigation suggest this is the most serious re-examination of the case in decades. Whether McCoy is proven guilty or not, the discovery has reignited interest. For the first time in years, people are asking with urgency, are we finally about to solve the D.B. Cooper case? 50 years after the jump, the story of D.B. Cooper hasn't faded. It's grown. Unlike many cold cases which drift into obscurity, this one became something more. A legend, a puzzle, a symbol. In American culture, D.B. Cooper exists somewhere between outlaw and mystery man. He didn't hurt anyone. He outsmarted the system. He disappeared clean. To many, he represents a strange kind of hero, the man who got away. The name D.B. Cooper was never his to begin with. It came from a reporter's mistake, confusing him with a random man named Dan Cooper who had been questioned and cleared early on. But the name stuck. It sounded better, mysterious, fictional, and that's what he became. In the years since, Cooper has appeared in Novels, like the Vesuvius Prophecy TV shows, like Prison Break, Leverage, and Loki films, and documentaries, comics, and video games. His story has been retold and reshaped, not always accurately, but always with fascination. Even NASA got in on the myth, naming a crater on Mars D.B. Cooper Crater as a nod to his vanishing act. What makes this story so durable isn't just the mystery, it's the emotion behind it. This wasn't a murder case. There was no gruesome violence, no child abduction. It wasn't about tragedy. It was about the unknown. And the way it was carried out, so clean, so quiet, has kept it alive for generations. The facts are incredible. He pulled off a mid-air heist, escaped using a parachute, left almost no evidence, and after half a century, still hasn't been conclusively identified. That's not just a case. That's a blueprint for myth. For the FBI, Cooper was a failure, a blemish on the record. Agents spent decades chasing shadows, following dead leads, fielding false confessions. No major agency wants to admit defeat, but this case beat them. For the public, though, it was different. Cooper became the gentleman bandit of the jet age. He didn't demand violence. He didn't shout. He drank bourbon, wore a tie, and handed off a polite ransom note. The sketch of him, sunglasses, neatly parted hair, expressionless, became iconic. He was just normal enough to disappear into a crowd, yet just bold enough to stay unforgettable. Even the aviation industry changed because of him. After the hijacking, airlines made significant changes to aircraft security. Boeing installed the Cooper vane, a mechanical latch preventing rear stair deployment mid-flight. Airports upgraded security screening procedures. The era of casual walk-on air travel came to an end. Cooper didn't just leave behind a legend, he left behind policies. The air travel system was never the same. Today, entire communities are devoted to unraveling the mystery. Forums, podcasts, Reddit threads, and YouTube channels all debate who he was, where he went, and whether he lived. Amateur sleuths continue to chase the case, following the tiniest leads. Some don't want the mystery solved. They say it would ruin the magic. Others argue that closure matters, that the truth deserves to be known. Whatever the final answer is, the Cooper case has become more than a crime. It's a mirror reflecting how America views freedom, rebellion, justice, and the unknown. Because, at its core, the D.B. Cooper story is not just about a man who vanished, it's about why we still care that he did. After 5 decades, the question at the heart of the D.B. Cooper mystery remains the same. Did he survive the jump, or die in the attempt? There is no definitive proof either way, but investigators, researchers, and amateur sleuths have spent years building arguments on both sides, some grounded in evidence, others in probability, all shaped by what little Cooper left behind. The case for death. The FBI's official position for most of the case's history has been straightforward. Cooper didn't survive. The evidence supporting this includes dangerous jump conditions. The aircraft was flying through a cold rainstorm with high winds and near-freezing temperatures. Poor visibility. The drop occurred at night, in total darkness, with no visual reference points. Improper clothing. Cooper wore a suit, loafers, and no helmet or gloves. There's no evidence he had survival gear. Difficult terrain. He landed in a remote, wooded region of Washington state with steep hills, rivers, and uneven forest floor. Old parachute. The parachute Cooper used was a military surplus NB-8, bulky and hard to steer, not ideal for a precise landing. Adding to this, he unknowingly, or perhaps carelessly, chose one non-functional reserve parachute that had been used for training. It was sewn shut and couldn't open. A professional would likely have noticed. For the FBI, these details painted a simple outcome. A poorly equipped man jumped into the wilderness and likely died on impact or succumbed to the elements within hours. The case for survival. Despite these facts, many believe Cooper made it out alive. Here's why. No body ever found. In over 50 years of search efforts, no bones, clothing, or gear linked to Cooper have surfaced. No missing persons match. No one fitting Cooper's description was ever reported missing in the weeks after the hijacking. $194,200 missing. Besides the small portion found at Tenna Bar, none of the ransom money has ever entered circulation. The tie clue, the materials on his tie, suggest Cooper was someone familiar with aerospace and engineering, not an amateur. The calm demeanor. Cooper was deliberate, polite, and in control throughout the hijacking. He showed no fear. That implies preparation. Some researchers argue that Cooper didn't land in the wilderness at all. They believe the FBI's flight path estimation was off by miles. He may have landed near farmland, a rural road, or even a private airstrip. If Cooper was experienced, familiar with the area, and had a plan for pickup or escape, his survival becomes far more plausible. The middle ground. There's also a hybrid theory, one that accepts a bit of both. Cooper may have survived the jump, but not for long. He could have been injured on landing. He might have buried the money and died before reaching help. Or he may have drowned in a river shortly after touching down. This theory is supported by the Tenna Bar discovery. Some argue that Cooper, in his final moments, may have disposed of the money to cover his tracks, or it simply washed away as he perished nearby. Still, no remains have been found to support that scenario either. The arrival of DNA evidence from the 2024 parachute discovery may finally break this debate. If Cooper lived and was McCoy, the story becomes one of survival, reinvention, and eventual capture. If the DNA proves no match, then the legend continues. At its core, the debate over Cooper's fate reflects how people view the case. Is it a story about a tragic risk gone wrong, or a successful escape into the unknown? Until proven otherwise, it's both. For over 50 years, the D.B. Cooper investigation has been a story without an ending. But in 2024, that story may have entered its final chapter. With one question: what happens if the DNA matches? When the FBI took custody of the parachute rig found on the McCoy family property, they did more than reopen a cold case. They created the possibility of closure. The tie left behind on Flight 305 holds a partial DNA profile. It's not enough to build a criminal case alone, but it's a benchmark. If a DNA sample from the recently discovered parachute or gear matches the tie, it would be the strongest forensic link ever found in the case. The implications would be immediate and historic. Scientific validation. First and foremost, a match would give the FBI the first biological proof of Cooper's identity. It would mean the tie did belong to the hijacker. The parachute was used in the jump. The suspect who owned it, Richard McCoy Jr., was D.B. Cooper. It would retroactively confirm that the man who pulled off one of the most famous heists in American history also committed a near-identical hijacking 5 months later, and was ultimately killed in a shootout with the FBI in 1974. The narrative would shift from unsolved to solved, but posthumously. Legal ramifications. Would the FBI reopen the case formally? Likely, only to close it permanently with an official conclusion. No one would be arrested. McCoy is dead, but the agency could release a public statement confirming the findings, updating Cooper's case file with name: Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. Date of death: November 9, 1974. Crime: Skyjacking. Flight 305, Northwest Orient Airlines. The legal impact would be minimal, but the symbolic impact would be enormous. Media and public reaction. A confirmed identity would dominate headlines across the U.S. and internationally. Major networks would run retrospectives. Podcasts would update episodes. YouTube channels and true crime communities would hold live discussions. Social media would flood with reactions, theories, and disbelief. But not everyone would accept the resolution. Some fans of the case might doubt the results, arguing the DNA could be contaminated or that the tie never belonged to Cooper. The myth is too big for some to let go easily. Still, the scientific evidence would be hard to dispute. Historical correction. The name D.B. Cooper would no longer refer to an unknown man. He would now be linked, officially, to a real individual with a military record, a family, a mugshot, and a grave. History books, documentaries, and school curriculums would need updating. The only unsolved skyjacking in U.S. history, no longer unsolved. What if it doesn't match? On the other hand, if the DNA comparison fails, then what? It means the parachute didn't belong to Cooper. The McCoy connection loses steam, and the case returns to the realm of theoretical. In that scenario, the case remains unsolved, but the search goes on. The FBI might reclassify the case as inactive, but public interest would surge again, pushing other suspects like Rackstraw and Peterson back into the spotlight. And the myth? It would grow stronger. Right now, as this video is being watched, testing may already be underway. If there's a match, it could be the final page of a mystery 5 decades in the making. If not, the legend lives on. Either way, this case, more than any other, has proven one thing. Time doesn't bury all secrets. Some stay in the sky. In the end, D.B. Cooper may never have intended to change history. He didn't fire a shot. He didn't harm a soul. He boarded a plane, made a demand, and disappeared into a storm. But his actions left an indelible mark, not just on aviation, not just on the FBI, but on the American imagination. He became a symbol of something bigger. The man who called himself Dan Cooper was calm, deliberate, and professional. He understood aircraft. He made calculated demands. He dressed well. He acted with control, not chaos. In an era of political upheaval, economic uncertainty, and growing distrust of government, Cooper's story resonated differently. He was seen by some as a man who beat the system, not with bullets or violence, but with planning and nerve. That's why the mystery endured. Because Cooper wasn't just a hijacker. He was an idea. The possibility that someone could pull off the impossible and vanish without a trace. But his legacy isn't just built on mystery, it's built on impact. Because of Cooper, airlines overhauled boarding procedures. The FAA mandated aircraft modifications, including the Cooper vane. The FBI created specialized units to investigate skyjackings. Federal policies shifted toward preventative aviation security. The general public began seeing air travel as vulnerable. Not untouchable, Cooper changed everything, without needing to show his face. And now, after all this time, we may be close to knowing who he was. The discovery of the parachute, the DNA testing, and the re-engagement by the FBI has pushed the story into a new phase. This isn't just a cold case anymore. It's active, it's relevant, and it's resonant because people still care, not just about justice, but about resolution. Whether or not the DNA leads to an answer, the search for Cooper has already done what no single act of crime solving usually does. It connected people. Generations of amateur detectives, researchers, scientists, pilots, and storytellers have worked together, often with more dedication than those paid to solve the case. It's more than a question of who was he? It's about what this story means to each of us. Is it about rebellion, mystery, intelligence, escape? Or is it about the last American outlaw getting away with it? Just once. Maybe one day we'll know everything. The name, the plan, the landing site, the fate. Or maybe we never will. But either way, the man in seat 18E, calmly sipping bourbon, holding a note, watching the clouds roll past the window, will remain one of the most haunting images in American history. He didn't just vanish into the night. He jumped into legend. Call to action. If you want to stay updated on the latest developments in the D.B. Cooper investigation, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We're following every credible lead, every update from the FBI, and every possible breakthrough in forensic analysis. Drop a comment below. Do you believe Richard McCoy was Cooper? Will the DNA test finally close the case, or keep the mystery alive? Like this video, if you've followed the Cooper story over the years, share it with someone who still believes the legend isn't over. And remember, Some mysteries aren't just unsolved, they're unforgettable.